All right, what's going on, everybody? Brad here with Top Tier Physical Therapy, and I wanted to share some important concepts to keep in mind when you're working on programming your core training. So it's pretty much widely known that training your core is important for things like athletics, lifting, or everyday life, but far too often we see this as just working our abdominals with things like crunches or sit-ups. And while abdominal strength may be important for our core, it is only a piece of the puzzle. We need to also consider the sides of our trunk and also the entire back. So keeping all this in mind when we're talking about core training, we really want to think about what are the primary roles of our core. And that can be broken down into two different concepts. One is the absorption of force, and the other one is the transferring of force. When we talk about absorbing force, really what we mean is the resistance of movement. So whether that's maintaining a base of support or resisting an external force trying to move our body in a certain direction. In sport, this may be something like a lineman, where I'm trying to resist a pass rusher, and I need to maintain my position, not letting them twist me every which way. In everyday life, this may be something like I'm holding onto a heavy suitcase and I don't want that suitcase to pull me down to the side. Or I'm carrying something and I need to maintain this upright posture. There's an external force working to move me and I need to use my core to resist that movement. This concept of force absorption is often thought of as stability training. So when we're thinking of heavy lifts like a squat or a deadlift, we need a strong and stable core to absorb the forces of this external load so that doesn't then encourage movement from my spine that may result in some injury over time. Now when we're training this force absorption component of our core, we want to be thinking of exercises that are forcing us to resist movement. That could be something as simple as a forearm plank or a side plank. It could be resisting rotation like with a Pallof press, but it could also be incorporating a unilateral load to a functional movement. So something like a suitcase step up or a single arm, single leg overhead press. Now the opposite of absorbing force would be the transferring of force. We see the transferring of force component come in more in athletics, specifically in rotational sports. So that could be something like throwing, a swinging motion like a golf swing or a baseball swing, even in lacrosse with shooting or passing. What's happening here is we're generating force from the ground, we're transferring it into our arms via our core. If we are lacking in this transferring ability of our core, it's going to then have a direct effect on our performance because all of that force that we are generating in our legs from the ground is not being transferred to my upper body, which would then result in a lower club speed, a slower bat swing, a softer throw, or a softer shot. So ways we can work on improving this force transferring component of our core is to move against resistance. So as before where we're trying to prevent movement, now we're encouraging movement, but we're doing so through resistance. And that can be accomplished with some exercises like a rotational lift, a rotational chop, or even some landmine rotations. It's a good rule of thumb for most people to work on both components of our core function, so absorbing force and transferring force. However, if you're in a sport where the demands of maintaining a strong base of support are very high, you may want to bias your training towards absorbing force. On the opposite hand, if you are in a sport where rotational power is important or transferring of force is important, you would then want to work on the transferring of force component of our core. But for everyday life and everyday training, it's best to work on both of these components.